Hello, I'm Chris Tozy, and I'm a musician living in San Francisco.
Evening falls through the walls. I'll hear it rain, hear it strain.
I'm Kate Van Horn. I'm a musician and I live in Santa Rosa, California.
I would describe my music style as a space rock opera, kind of instrumental music that has rock melodies with theatrical aspects.
My musical style is definitely pop, influenced by jazz, classical music, and poetry. Music is everything to me. Music is so important in my life. If I couldn't play music, I don't know why I would go on living.
Music to me is life. To some people it's sounds or songs, but to me, music is everything.
The best part about being a musician is definitely all of the connections I have made with other people. I have made some friends that I never ever could have imagined making.
I wake up and I'm working on something that I believe in and I truly love every day. I would say probably the very first time I heard music, I knew I wanted to be a musician. It was my father's record of Frank Zappa. It has all these mixtures of guitar and talking and theatrical stuff and everything that has shaped my music the way it is today.
There was never a time in my life that I can remember not wanting to be a musician and not being a musician actively. My mom always sang with us and I was always drawn to a piano if there was one in the room. Being a musician is hard. There really aren't many things about it that are easy. It takes up so much of my time, so much of my money. It's hard.
The hardest part of being a musician is you do this for yourself, but at some point there has to be some kind of validation that comes from the public. I've not been to China or Xinjiang before.
I've never been to China and I've never been to Xinjiang.
I do not even know what to expect, but I'm excited about it.
We're going to Xinjiang for 2 weeks. We're going to be meeting professional musicians as well as folk artists in the villages.
I look forward to the whole experience.
It's going to be tremendous. Today was my first day in Urumqi, which is the capital of Xinjiang. In the morning, we visited the Yanghang Mosque, which in Chinese means overseas banks. It's located in an area of the city where a lot of banks and embassies used to be located, so that's why it's called the Yanghang Mosque.
The mosque was built in 1897 by donations and is 100 years old. It has over 30,000 square feet.
It was incredibly beautiful on the outside, very ornate, and the colors were just very calming but very beautiful at the same time. The mosque was located in an area of the city that is very bustling.
There's highways and high-rises everywhere, and it's quite a contrast to the spirituality that's going on inside.
Women are not usually allowed in the mosque, so it was a great opportunity for me to go into a mosque.
As as we approached the mosque, we had to take our shoes off. This was my first time to ever be in a mosque, so just to see the layout of where you could see where the people would stand, and that it held 3 balconies. I believe it held over 1,000 people that would worship at one time.
The carpeting on the floor was beautiful. Most of it was green with patterns in it, but there were a number of carpets around the outside edge of the green, which was the main floor, and they were all different kinds of carpets.
As we looked up, there's chandeliers, beautiful chandeliers and ornate writing and colors, really amazing.
Imagine 1,000 people praying in there. It must be so moving.
In the afternoon, we were able to visit a Uyghur performance group that we were invited to watch, and basically we were overwhelmed by new musicianship, new musical instruments, and an orchestrated sound that I'd never heard before.
I was so surprised because I've never heard this music before. I never even knew the Uyghur people existed. And it's shocking to me that I didn't, because their voices are so powerful and clear, and the way the instruments sound is just, it's so moving. The song was introduced by a melody line on an instrument similar to a guitar. One of the singers came down off the riser and stood front and center in the middle of the room and sang a melody in unison with the guitar that was playing. And his voice was very clear, very pure, very loud for being 20, 30 feet away from me. He had the best expression on his face. He just seemed so calm and so relaxed.
Part of the music is that there's dancers that are involved with this, and so we were able to see one of the dancers.
The way their skirts move and the way their hair spins around them is just moving.
I had seen musicians that I want to aspire to be like. These guys probably don't get the credit they deserve, and they are the top 1%. You can definitely tell this is their life, their passion, and you can feel it, you can hear it. This instrument's called the kalum. It is very interesting to me because it seems to be the lead piece in the whole band. I hear the highest melodies, and it reminds me of a lead guitar, which I play. We got to basically try a couple. It was a great experience that we'd never get a chance to ever have without coming here.
This instrument is the satar. It impressed me for a few different reasons. The first reason is that it has only one string that is played, and it has a bunch of strings that aren't played at all, which I think is very interesting. And I also liked that the performer's father was a famous sitar player as well. I got to play one of the instruments, which was amazing. It was hard, but it was beautiful. I never even knew this music existed, and it's so beautiful and so amazing.
So coming over here and experiencing other music and other musicians, it's very overwhelming. I left there feeling very excited about my own music, about their music.
Overall, this first day in Urumqi has been mind-blowing. It's shocking to me that I never heard this music before. It's very disappointing. But on the upside, I've heard it now. And I'm really excited. I think that it's going to have a really strong impact on my writing.
Blown away by the musicianship and the abilities of every person in the whole ensemble. Watching them perform and then getting to interact with them and grab their instruments and use them and have them show us how to use them was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. This is a highlight of my life.
Today was our second day in Urumqi, and in the morning we visited a workshop where the traditional Uyghur instruments are handmade.
We walked down a small alleyway of the basic two-room shop.
There was a man sitting at the end of the alley, wet sanding. We were able to ask him a few questions about what he was doing. He told us that he had been making instruments for over 10 years. The instrument he was working on takes about 20 days to finish it, and it was about 3 days away from being finished. It already had the bone inlay in it. Then we went inside the shop. It was very small, somewhat cramped.
As we talked to them, we found out the father had done this over 50 years, and he is 61 years old. And his son, who is 30, has done this over 20 years. So they've both been doing this since they were 10 years old.
We learned that his father had learned from his father, and we learned that it's passed down from generation to generation.
We found out that there was 8 members involved total, and that each person kind of had their own role in the making of the instruments. But basically they were passing down the techniques. So each individual could make the instrument if they wanted to, but they all played a certain role in the whole process of how the finished product was made. His son was carving out the instrument.
And he had basically the rough shape of the guitar-like instrument, and he set it down in some worn depressions on the bench he was working on.
If he makes a mistake, the instrument is ruined.
As he was chopping away, the chips accumulated inside the body, and you could smell the wood sort of wafting up out, and it was very sweet and very lovely.
This whole process takes a total of 20 days just to hollow out the body. He was taking the tuning pegs and actually sanding them down so they could fit perfectly.
Two of them actually sat down and performed a few songs for us. It was very entertaining, and the songs they played sounded very traditional, like a drone underneath with a melody line moving over it. Pretty simple melodies, but really great rhythms. It really got my foot tapping. afternoon, we visited the Bazaar, or market. They had all different kinds of things there.
From silk scarves to vases, herbs, medicine.
Raisins and dates and nuts and furs and jewelry.
As well as musical instruments. The layout was very narrow. When negotiating, the locals had calculators and they would type in the exact amount that they wanted, show it to me, and then they would hand me the calculator and I would punch in another number, give it back to them, and then they would hand it back or shake their head. So it was kind of a process of back and forth, back and forth.
The shopkeeper, who was a Uyghur woman, grabbed a scarf off the rack and wrapped it around my neck, and I knew immediately that I had to have it. It was gorgeous. And about 15 minutes of negotiating, I finally got it for a really great price, about $15 US, which we would never be able to get it for that price at home. So it was a great afternoon. Today we had the opportunity to drive about 40 miles south of the city of Urumqi to Nanshan Mountain, which is over 5,000 feet above sea level.
We got to see a lot of farmland, a lot of beautiful sights, and coming up the mountain we saw the lake, and definitely rivals any kind of scenery that you see in California.
When we left the city, it was warm, and as we were winding our way up the narrow mountain roads, the temperature dropped to about 20 degrees. It was much cooler up in the mountains. There were about 200 sheep grazing by a lake.
We met the Kazakh people. The Kazakh people live in yurts, which are tent-like structures.
The scenery around the yurt is very dull. The colors are dull greens, dark greens. The rocks are very gray. Before we went in, we were greeted by several members of the settlement. Walking into the yurt was similar to, it was like being a character in the movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, where everything is made of candy and it's very colorful. It was just dazzling to look at.
The yurt is covered with rugs. There's some basic oven type of structure in the middle. They have a little power generator that runs off of solar. And then we were greeted with a song by some women and a man musician who was playing a two-stringed guitar-like instrument. Very beautiful and definitely a new sight that I hadn't seen here.
It was very, very pretty. The song was very pretty.
And then they actually sat down and did a duet between a man and a woman.
Each one of them, the man first, sings to a traditional melody, but improvises the lyrics.
We were told the gentleman was saying how good his life was, how is your life?
It was amazing to me to learn that they were improvising the lyrics. I could tell that the woman was a little nervous and that she was having a little bit of a hard time thinking of what to sing.
It was very human and natural.
Improvising lyrics is something I could never do. At the end of the musical performance, the musicians actually invited us to dance with them. So we did. We got up and we did our best.
The dancers invited us to dance with them and kind of mimic their moves and kind of did a little dance with them. Definitely got out of my comfort zone and wanted to partake in this. The way the Kazakh people prepare their food, they had a few different stations. They had the mini barbecue pit, they had a big round pot that they were cooking vegetables in. They also had a bigger pot where they had put the sheep and the meat in. And then next to it, they had a preparation table where the men and women were cutting up the meat, putting it on skewers.
They were preparing kebabs.
It was in this little mini barbecue metal thing with charcoal, and they basically used this technique of flame, smoking it. Then they would cut off the flame, just smoke it, and then flame it back and forth. And then they used 3 different spices on it. By far the tastiest thing that I've had in China so far.
It smelled amazing.
After that, we went back into the yurt and had the traditional dinner.
2 older brothers who live here honored us with some of the meat from the face of the sheep. It's a traditional concept of honoring someone, and they call it face. They call it giving face.
Was also handed the ear. This is a special thing for them, and so it was a special thing to give us.
I was surprised at how flavorful the meat was. It really just tasted amazing. One thing that really struck me about all the people that I saw was that they look so happy. They have all these great smile lines, and they all smile, and their music is all about how great their lives are. They even were competing to see whose life was better. It's something that we don't hear a lot in music.
It's a community that's based off of family, togetherness, and music. And life is really complete and beautiful here.
I'm surprised by how overwhelmed I am by the experiences I've had just in the last few days. It made me realize that a lot of my music is cathartic. It's about dealing with my suffering and the things that I struggle with. I think that it will change how I write, at least a little bit, to focus more on the good things that are in my life, and to really use music as an expression of joy.
For some reason, today connected with me. We got to meet the people that live off the farm, live off the land, and it was awesome. Great people, great vibe, great family, and truly, I think, living life to the fullest.
Today was our 4th day in China. We were able to leave the city once again and take a 2-hour drive to the Nanshan Mountain. This is where the Heavenly Lake is located, and as you can see behind me, it truly is heavenly.
Nanshan Mountain has tall evergreen forests, a huge, gorgeous lake called Heavenly Lake that is a blue-green color that I've never seen before.
And the snow-capped mountains in the back are just the capper on this very spiritual place. You can feel the energy everywhere.
We were able to take a boat out onto Heavenly Lake.
As we got onto the boat, I realized I haven't been on a boat in probably 5 to 10 years, and I'm stuck in the city working on my career, and I need to get out more. I need to get to these kind of places because It brings you a calmness that you don't have in the city. The smell of the water and the size of the lake, you feel like you're in a different place here.
Every day it's like I'm on this J curve. I'm able to appreciate it more. I'm able to interact more. Get out of my little box that Chris Tozzi puts himself into, and get out of it. And once I get out of it and I scare myself and I push myself, I get to the other end and I'm happier, I'm better, I'm more accomplished.
I'm so hot. The reason I'm so hot is that we're in Turpan. Turpan has the third lowest elevation of anywhere in the world and is the hottest place in China.
We started the day by visiting the Carez well.
And we were actually able to go down the well and see how the system worked. And it was really neat.
Because this area is so hot and so dry, they have to build the canal underground. We are looking at the Carez well, which is an underground irrigation system that's been used in this area of China for over 2,000 years. It's constructed completely by hand without the use of any modern machinery or building materials.
And in China, this is considered to be on par with the Great Wall and the Grand Canyon.
We next visited a place where raisins are made.
Grapes are one of the top 3 products that contribute to the local economy, next to cotton and melon.
Ever since I was a little kid, I always thought it was really strange that raisins were made from grapes. And today I got to find out how they're made. And it's really simple. They take these long poles, they're about 6 feet long, and they attach little spikes, maybe about 3 to 4 inches long. And they just hang picked clusters of grapes from them in a room that's shaded and also well ventilated, so that the wind can blow through and dry out the grapes. The next site we visited was the Emin Minaret.
The minaret is a big tower-like structure.
The Emin Minaret was built in honor of a Turpan general named Emin Hoja in 1777.
It has a very Middle Eastern look to it, and it's located next to a mosque. The mosque has a wooden ceiling and pillars.
I was able to step into a sort of foyer area, and it was stunning. The main prayer area has these enormous wooden pillars, and they're just gorgeous. The wood is just beautiful.
In the afternoon, we were able to visit a family-owned vineyard.
We were led back into a sort of courtyard area with a trellis over it, overgrown with grapevines. And it was really, really hot when we were out on the street, but underneath the grapevine trellis, it was really cool and really still, so it was very comfortable. The family had us sit with them around a little banquet table, and then they actually performed for us.
The traditional mukam instruments were brought out.
They performed a duet with the head of the household playing the drum and his brother playing the guitar.
We also had a young girl from the family get up and dance, and she was really good. You definitely tell that this was something that came naturally to her.
She was probably about 11 or 12 years old, and she was so good. She just took my breath away. The way she moved her neck and the way she moved her arms and her shoulders was actually very adult to me. She really seemed like she knew all the moves.
The really cool aspect of the day is that we were later asked to perform with them. So I got to play my guitar, share my music with people from a complete other side of the world. And to be a musician, that's what it's all about, to be able to share your music. So this was a real honor for me to get up and even play for them.
opportunity to sing one of my favorite American folk songs, Amazing Grace, for the family that owned the vineyard. And it was a really great experience for me because we sat and listened to their music, and their music is very different from the music that we're used to hearing and performing. And I sang a cappella, which is something that I very rarely do, and I could really hear myself, which is something that's rare as well. And I really felt that I was able to connect with them.
It was really, I think, one of the highlights for us to be musicians and be able to share that. Our last stop today was Jiao He, an ancient civilization that dates back over 2,000 years. From an aerial view, Jiao He looks like a big ship cruising through the sea.
The city is about a mile long and about 900 feet wide, and it's built on top of a cliff that's about 90 feet tall. The city was founded during the Han Dynasty between 206 and 220 BCE and was inhabited up until the 13th century CE. At its height, there were over 6,500 residents in the city, and that makes it one of the most largely populated ancient cities in the world. This site reminds me a lot of the Anasazi ruins at Chaco Canyon in New Mexico, except this site is much bigger. The Chaco Canyon site only has about 20 or 25 buildings, at least the main area. And this is definitely a huge city where lots of people were for over 1,500 years. And you can really feel that being here. Even though it's very quiet now, when you stand and look out over the ruins, you can tell that this was a bustling place for a lot of years. Ever since we left the Kazakh settlement on Nanshan Mountain, the melody that the woman was singing when the four people were performing for us inside the yurt has been stuck in my head. And I've been playing around with an idea based on that melody. I don't really know if that will develop into a complete song, but if it does, I am certain that the song will be about celebrating my life and celebrating the things that are good in it, because that was the inspiration.
Today was our second day in Turpan. Our first stop was at the Flaming Mountain. The Flaming Mountain is located 20 miles out of Turpan. It was 50 miles long and 4 miles wide.
The altitude is about 1,500 feet, and its highest point is about 2,500 feet. It's definitely the hottest place in China, and you can see that when you look at the ground. It's all cracked.
The uniqueness of the Flaming Mountain is that it's a huge mountain that has these little ripples going through it, and it looks like streams have been going through the actual mountain.
It's called the Flaming Mountain because of its red color in the afternoon sun.
So we're standing right in front of the giant thermometer. It is only 10 a.m. and it is already 96 degrees here.
We actually were able to ride camels. I have never ridden a camel before.
I grew up on a ranch, so I've ridden horses before.
It was similar to riding a horse, but it was a little bit slower.
The camel wasn't as smooth, it was a little jerkier, but it was definitely cool.
The camels actually seemed really sleepy, and I could completely relate to that out in that hot sun.
It was a great experience. Later we visited the Gauchon Ruins, which are about 1,400 years old.
the city of Gauchon, which was first settled in the 1st century BCE and went through lots of different power struggles until it finally became the Uyghur capital in 850 CE. It was a major staging post along the Silk Road until the 14th century when it burned, and then the Uyghur capital was moved to Turpan.
These ruins are similar to the ones we saw yesterday, but they're a little bit more worn down, so it's a little bit harder to tell the structures that were there. You can see restoration going on.
Texts in classical Sanskrit, Uyghur, Chinese, and Tibetan have all been discovered at Gauchon. And when you're there, you can really sense how many different cultures lived and interacted there.
The highlight of the Gauchon ruins was definitely the donkey rides, or the donkey taxi.
In order to get to the site, we had to take a donkey taxi. And that's another thing that I've never done before. And it was quite an experience. The donkey that was in control of our taxi was not very obedient and had a mind of its own. It wanted to go when it was supposed to stop, and sometimes when it was supposed to go, it wouldn't go at all. It was really funny.
Whoa, whoa. The ride's kind of bumpy and the dust is kind of brought up, and the donkeys are actually pretty fast. As we traveled on the road, I was able to take video and take pictures of the surrounding desert, and you can kind of see the formation of the city in the distance. My thoughts in the Gauchon ruins were basically thinking about who lived there before, what had taken place before, and how these people lived. So as I took video, it was very overwhelming to get the sun beating down on you and to think about how these people survived. Later, we visited the Valley of the Grapes. The Valley of Grapes has been here for over 2,000 years and produces over 100 different grapes.
In the area where we were, the trellises covered with grapevines just seemed to not end ever. There were tons of these brilliant, perfect, ripe, juicy-looking clusters of grapes, and we weren't allowed to pick them. After what seemed like miles of walking under these grape trellises, we got to watch another performance of the traditional Uyghur music and dance.
One of the main moves for the dancers was utilizing their skirt with the rotations and dropping down and coming back up, so it kind of made the dresses look like a jellyfish.
The way the girls were moving their hands were so graceful, they almost looked like snakes. It was so fluid the way they were moving their hands, and I was mesmerized. The musical instruments were the traditional Uyghur instruments we've been seeing. The wind instrument was almost like an oboe. It was very ear-piercing.
It was kind of an overwhelming instrument. It definitely was louder than all the other stuff and definitely took the lead performance of the group. The music was very good. The dancers were definitely part of it. It was a cohesive thing rather than just dancing to the music. You could tell that it was very intertwined.
Well, our visit to Turpan has come to an end, but before we left town, we were able to make a quick stop at a local elementary school and actually attend a music class here.
As we entered the gate, you could feel the energy, the youth. It reminded me of being in school.
When we were walking down the corridor to get to the classroom, we could hear the children all singing, and they were singing really loudly, very confidently, and all in unison, and they had great pitch.
We were able to observe the kids as they were learning. The first thing that you notice about the kids here, they're very observant, they are obedient, they want to learn. You almost feel like it's a college course. The music class actually had many different aspects. A few girls got up and danced.
It was really interesting because they sang the songs in both Chinese and Uyghur. This is a Chinese and Uyghur school, so they teach all of the songs in both languages, which I thought was very interesting. Very similar to schools in California, where they teach in English and in Spanish.
Later, Kate was able to teach the kids row, row, row your boat. And it was pretty cool for kids to learn a whole new language, sing it. They were quick learners. They picked up on it very quick and were actually able to go through the whole song.
This is a classic American children's song that I sang in school from the time I was 5 years old. Life is but a dream. They were really great learners. They learned the melody really fast. I was really impressed by their ability to learn the way the words sounded, even if they really weren't that familiar with the English language. Well, it's our final day of travel in Xinjiang, and we spent this very windy afternoon at the Xinjiang Arts Institute. We were very privileged to watch a performance of students playing several mukam pieces for us. The first piece was a full chorus. It began like a lot of the mukam pieces begin, I've noticed, with a sort of droning tone and then a soloist singing along with that. That they were playing was really gorgeous. It was very complex.
The soloist who I was drawn to most was playing the ijik, the violin type of thing. He has his bow and he's playing it. You can see his emotion, his head and his body. And he closes his eyes and he's feeling the instrument. You can feel that. I admire him because I feel hopefully that I do that with my music.
The Uyghurs are playing completely acoustically, no microphones, no amplification of any kind. And then to contrast that with this very digital, highly sequenced music, very much based on being able to amplify the digital signal, it was a great compare and contrast for me.
The highlight for me was performing. I got to share my music with people from across the world. They would probably never go onto MySpace and see my music. After my performance, my travel partner, Kate, was able to perform as well. She is a great singer and a piano player, and she was phenomenal. I had never heard Kate sing her own music before. I was really blown away.
Initially, I was really nervous thinking about performing for them because I didn't go to music school, and here all these students are studying music. As soon as I started playing, I realized that music is kind of a universal language. Everyone understands something that's coming from your heart and soul, and they made me feel right at home. This trip definitely exceeded my expectations. And what I learned was that the music of a culture is as much a function of the lifestyle of the people as anything else.
When I first got on the plane, I pretty much thought, okay, I'm going to another country, I'm going to see some other people. But I was blown away by everything. There's a lot of musicians who are angry people and jaded people. And if you don't allow yourself to open up to everything, you go down that road. I saw myself going down that road, and I don't want to be that person.
It was mind-opening in a way that I never could have predicted. And I don't think I can predict what the outcome will be for me in the long term, but I'm already thinking about coming back here. I'm definitely looking forward to getting back to my studio and working with some ideas that have come to me during this trip. And I really want to add some rhythmic elements, like what I heard here, to get people up and get people moving.
As I head back to the States, I'm taking all this musical inspiration that has gathered up inside of me from the first day of seeing the Uyghur people and their music and their instruments, to the visuals of the deserts, the mountains, all these emotions, the family, the traditions. All these things are gonna inspire me with new music. I already hear new things in my head, new tones, new sounds. And I'm really looking forward to taking this and writing my new batch of songs.
I've returned to my beautiful home in California from my travels in Xinjiang, and I have spent about 6 weeks working really hard on 2 musical pieces that were inspired by my trip there.
As soon as we got back from China, I started working on the 2 new pieces. I was very inspired.
One of the pieces is based on the Kazakh melody that we heard at Nanshan Mountain.
Forge ahead into the rough, toward forfeited promise of more beyond the horizon.
first piece that I wrote that was all slide guitar took me about a week to write. It came really quick. All the inspiration was there, all the notes were there. The name of it was Face to Faces. It was a big moment in the movie, and it's kind of inspired from the Kazakh people.
He's a local San Francisco artist, and let's first hear what he sounds like, shall we, here on KUSF? This is live in the KUSF studios in San Francisco. Take it away, baby.
The other piece is called Rebel Feet, and it is inspired by the rhythmic pattern that I heard in a lot of the music that we heard when we were there.
Safely keep, soon unleashed, defeated, origin.
Now, having been exposed to this music, I will seek out other forms of music that I've never heard before. The impact of just this one region of music on my writing has been so tremendous. I can't even imagine what I can write if I keep expanding my horizons. The world is huge and undiscovered, and why not venture out and discover yourself in the world and meet people who you didn't even know existed. It's really, really been inspiring, and I'm looking forward to traveling around the world a lot more in my life.
The second piece that I wrote was on guitar. It's not so much a direct sounding like China. It's more of the feelings of calmness when we went out to Turpan in the heat, and it kind of broke me down a little bit. But as it broke me down, I found this total calmness. The trip to Xinjiang influenced my music in a lot of ways. First, obviously, musically, hearing the notes, hearing the different scales that they used. Emotionally, as I talked to these people and their 10th generation, 8th generation, we've devoted our whole lives to it. And just China was overwhelming. The different groups of people, the culture, the food, it's just inside me now. And really right now, I'm finally just able to get the inspiration out a little bit.